Major breaking news. The U.S. has called for a pause on the Johnson & Johnson vaccines after rare clotting cases. The FDA and the CDC will stop using the vaccine at federal sites and urge states to do so as well while they examine the safety issues. Now, most of you may know this is coming not that long after we've heard the AstraZeneca vaccine also has a rare side effect, blood clotting. The Guardian reports, what is the rare syndrome and how is it caused? I want to break this down for you, but there's a lot to go over in very quick context. The first thing I will say as we get into this, please do not take medical advice from people on TV or from people like me. I probably will get things wrong, and I implore you to make sure you're talking to your own doctor. We've got breaking news about this, but there's a couple things that need to be pointed out. The media, they're not doctors. The people on TV who are doctors, some of them don't even practice. Your doctor that you go to knows what's best for you. Now, Donald Trump has issued a statement slamming the FDA, saying essentially that they're jamming up what is a great vaccine with rare and limited side effects. This, to me, is very strange. We have seen many mainstream news sources be very anti-vax. Meanwhile, they're calling everyone else anti-vax. We've seen people like Dr. Fauci and these experts say that even if you get the vaccine, you still got to wear a mask. You still can't travel. To me, it's all very strange. The vaccine is supposed to be getting everyone back to normal. The commercials are saying, if you want to get back to normal, everyone go get your vaccine. Yet at the same time, we have these experts saying don't do it. Now we have the FDA, the CDC saying 2 of these vaccines have rare side effects. As one journalist points out, something interesting. Olivia Salon says, it is extraordinary how society tolerates the much larger risk of blood clots in women taking the contraceptive pill, but not the very small risk from COVID vaccines. I'm not going to tell you what or why. I don't know. I can just tell you this. There is going to be a pause on this. We've seen it in Europe as well. Check this out. We have from WebMD, it's from March 15th, several countries suspend use of AstraZeneca vaccine. There's a lot of reasons this could be. And Donald Trump has issued a statement. We'll read through this. I'll give you the breaking news. It could just be that we rushed through this process. While Donald Trump received tons of praise for Operation Warp Speed, getting these vaccines rushed through. Well, maybe we needed more time. Maybe we needed more research on the effects and how this will affect people. What are the side effects? Or it could be the media has just put too much pressure highlighting the very rare side effects. Apparently, it's slightly less than a 1 in 1 million chance you'll get these rare side effects. But they did pause this. And again, talk to your doctor because they'll know officially what's better. What apparently is happening is they're concerned of the side effects they've seen so far. They're serious and there may be more people, so it may actually get worse. I guess they're worried now if you've received these vaccines and you're feeling leg pains or headaches, you need to call your doctor. Don't take advice from me. Let me read you these stories, give you this breakdown, and then I'll read you the statements from Donald Trump. We'll talk about the politics of this. The New York Times is reporting federal health agencies on Tuesday called for an immediate pause in the use of the Johnson & Johnson single-dose COVID vaccine after 6 recipients in the U.S. developed a rare disorder involving blood clots within about 2 weeks of vaccination. I'll pause. Some tweets are noting one of the individuals, I believe, was like 27 years old, a female with no prior health conditions or history of any illness, got the vaccine, got blood clots. Some people began asking, could it be more likely that it came from birth control pills? We don't know, so let's follow the advice so far. Listen, I know a lot of people are probably going to look at this and say, see, I told you so. I don't think this is a see, I told you so at all. It's hard to know what to do and when to do it. Science isn't always right. That's why I say it 50 billion times. Please talk to your doctor. I don't want to hear stories about people who turned on Dr. Fauci's advice and he said, don't wear a mask, and they didn't. And then he came back later saying, do it. You need to talk to your doctor. Let me read more. All 6 recipients were women between the ages of 18 and 48. 1 woman died, and a second woman in Nebraska has been hospitalized in critical condition. Nearly 7 million people in the U.S. have received Johnson & Johnson shots so far, and roughly 9 million more doses have been shipped out to the states, according to the data from the CDC. Quote, we are recommending a pause in the use of this vaccine out of an abundance of caution. Dr. Peter Marks, director of the Food and Drug Administration Center for Biologics Evaluation and Research, and Dr. Ann Schuchat, principal deputy director of the CDC, in a joint statement, they said, right now, these adverse events appear to be extremely rare. Now, some people might be saying if it's extremely rare, why shut this down? There's politics involved, but it could be. These are the people that have been saying over and over again, if it saves 1 life. There's a challenge here. Vaccines have side effects. All medications do. You want to save one life. What really ends up happening is they're like, without the vaccine, 100,000 people would die. With the vaccine, 1,000 people would die. I'm not giving any hard numbers. I'm just saying, and they weigh that cost benefit. They say, or I should say, risk analysis. While the move was framed as a recommendation to health practitioners in the states, the federal government is expected to pause administration of the vaccine at all federally run vaccination sites. Federal officials expect that state health officials will take that as a strong signal to do the same. Within 2 hours of the announcement, Governor Mike DeWine of Ohio, a Republican, advised all health providers in his state to temporarily stop giving the Johnson & Johnson shots. New York, Connecticut, Nebraska, and other states quickly followed suit. Scientists with the FDA and CDC will jointly examine possible links between the vaccine and the disorder and determine whether the FDA should continue to authorize use of the vaccine for all adults or limit the authorization. An emergency meeting of the CDC's outside advisory committee has been scheduled for Wednesday. The move could complicate the nation's vaccination efforts at a time when many states are confronting a surge in new cases and seeking to address vaccine hesitancy. Regulators, well, hold on, man. Come on. That's not fair. People are hesitant, and now the CDC is basically issuing a warning on another vaccine. We've already seen a warning on AstraZeneca. So if people are worried, I do think it's fair. Now, interestingly, I love this. I've had people say that I'm both anti-vax and shilling for vaccines. Yeah. I'm also left-wing to right-wing media and right-wing to left-wing media. It's really simple. I know I'm going to say it for the 50 millionth time. Just talk to your doctor. But the point I'm trying to make, I often tell people, like, I go to the doctor, he prescribes me medicine. I don't know what it is. I just trust my doctor. And I think people are in their right to research this and they're in their right to say, I would like to wait. I want to feel safe. Some people should have waited and didn't because it was already advised if you're pregnant, don't get this. Now, your doctor may tell you differently. We've seen reports in the media. I've had guests tell me their doctors have said you should not be getting this right now while your wife is pregnant, things like that. Or the wife should not be getting it. So again, it's about what your doctor says to you. They're trying to address vaccine hesitancy, but now it's kind of, well, some people are going to feel justified. They say regulators in Europe and elsewhere are concerned about a similar issue with another coronavirus vaccine developed by AstraZeneca and Oxford University researchers. That concern has driven up some resistance to all vaccines, even though the AstraZeneca version has not been authorized for emergency use in the U.S. So that's an important distinction. The vast majority of the nation's vaccine supply comes from two manufacturers, Pfizer, BioNTech, and Moderna, which together deliver about more than 23 million doses a week of their two-shot vaccines. There have been no significant safety concerns about either of those vaccines. I will tell you this. I have many friends who have posted selfies of them getting the vaccines. Many of our guests, libertarian, conservatives, moderates, they've come here. They have been vaccinated. Everybody, for the most part, I know, seems to have been okay. I do have one peripheral story where someone in my family said a family friend got sick and ended up in the ER, but that happens. It does. So, look, I'm just saying, I think for the most part, it's probably okay. But if they're saying Johnson & Johnson has serious issues, then I would, at this point, all right, well, there you go. Whatever doubts you may have had, maybe you didn't have any, there's some reason to be concerned, according to the CDC and the FDA. They say, while shipments of the Johnson & Johnson vaccine have been much more limited, the Biden administration has still been continuing counting on using hundreds of thousands of doses every week. In addition to requiring only a single dose, the vaccine is easier to ship and store than the other two, which must be stored at extremely low temperatures. Mark D. Levine, a New York City councilman, lamented on Twitter that the pause would be a huge setback for the city's vaccination program, which he said relies entirely on Johnson & Johnson to inoculate the homebound, reach small private doctors' offices, and supply mobile vaccination vans. NYC now has the biggest messaging challenge yet in vaccination, he wrote. We have to do everything possible to avoid a collapse in confidence in vaccination overall. I do agree with this. I'm not a fan of Levine and the strategies he's had since the beginning. I think many mistakes have been made, but we need people to have confidence. Listen, it's not just about whether you feel safe or don't. It's about whether or not we are going to put an end to bad policy. We're going to get back to work. We're going to get the economy back on track. And for the most part, things have been going well in Texas and Florida. In fact, Texas said one of the reasons for opening up is because they have access to the vaccine. So this is bad across the board. However, as you can see, it seems like it'll mostly negatively impact the blue states and cities where their lockdowns are much more strict. Jeffrey D. Zients, the White House COVID-19 response coordinator, said Tuesday the pause, quote, will not have a significant impact. The Biden administration's plans to deliver enough vaccine to be able to inoculate all 260 million adults in the U.S. by the end of May. With the Johnson & Johnson setback, federal officials expect there will only be enough to cover fewer than 230 million adults. That's probably fine. But a certain percentage of the population is expected to refuse shots, so the supply may cover all the demand. Mr. Zients said the administration will still reach every adult who wants to be vaccinated by the May 31st target. Federal officials are concerned that doctors may not be trained to look for the rare disorder if recipients of the vaccine develop symptoms of it. The Federal Health Agency said Tuesday morning that the treatment of the specific type of blood clot is different from the treatment that might typically be administered for blood clots. Usually an anticoagulant drug called heparin is used to treat blood clots. In this setting, administration of heparin may be dangerous and alternative treatments may need to be given. In a news release, Johnson & Johnson said, we are aware that thromboembolic events, including those with thrombocytopenia, hope I got that one, have been reported with COVID-19 vaccines. At present, no clear causal relationship has been established between these rare events and the Janssen COVID-19 vaccine. Janssen is the name of the Johnson & Johnson division that developed the vaccine. In the U.S. alone, 300,000 to 600,000 people a year develop blood clots, according to the CDC. Okay, so we get that point. Let's jump over to the AstraZeneca story and talk about what's going on with this deadly thrombosis, because this is a different vaccine having similar effects. I'm curious as to how that is and why that is. They're not the same vaccine. They're different companies. Yet they're both, apparently we're seeing this very serious side effect. The Guardian reports evidence is growing of a link between the COVID-19 vaccine and a deadly thrombosis, and theories are emerging as to why. They say since rare but severe clotting was seen in some people following vaccination with AstraZeneca's COVID-19 vaccine, researchers worldwide have been grappling to understand why the clotting syndrome known as thrombosis with thrombocytopenia, clotting with a low platelet count, occurs. Most cases of these clots occurred in veins in the brain, a condition called cerebral venous sinus thrombosis, or CVST. Though some occurred in other veins, including those to the abdomen, that is splanchnic vein thrombosis, it has a high death rate. Evidence is growing that the vaccine is causing this rare clotting syndrome. So what happens in those affected, and more importantly, why? What do we know about this syndrome? The Guardian reports platelets are cells that usually help to stop bleeding by clumping together to form a blood clot. In AstraZeneca vaccine recipients affected by this rare clotting syndrome, the number of platelets drop. A unique immune system reaction occurs involving the remaining platelets in white blood cells. And it is this reaction that makes the blood more clumpy, leading to clotting. The condition is very similar to another relatively rare but serious clotting condition caused by the use of a blood thinner called heparin. In both heparin use and administration of the AstraZeneca vaccine, the rare clotting disorder appears within 2 weeks, usually between day 4 and 20. In those affected after being given heparin, the immune system makes antibodies to a complex of heparin and a protein called platelet factor 4, triggering this dangerous clotting. Those affected by the syndrome after receiving the AstraZeneca vaccine also have the same complex with antibodies to platelet factor 4 in their plasma. Dr. Jose Perdomo, a senior researcher officer in the Hematology Research Unit at the University of New South Wales, St. George and Sutherland Clinical School, said, "We know what's happening, but the why is not known." He said much is still unknown about why heparin-induced thrombocytopenia occurs. And that condition was first reported in the 60s. The exact mechanism causing the vaccine-induced thrombosis with thrombocytopenia may never be known, he said. But there are some theories. One is that some people are already predisposed to this condition because of previous bacterial or viral infections. That's because infections can lead the body to produce what's called cell-free DNA, which is basically extracellular DNA from dying cells in the blood. Though cell-free DNA can also derive from normal cells. That DNA somehow behaves like heparin. That the molecule, in this case DNA, can form complexes with the protein called platelet factor 4, Perdomo said. That complex is the one that gives rise to antibodies, which sees the complex as an invading bacteria. Once that complex is there, you have all these reactions, including the activation of clotting, for example. Perdomo said one theory as to why the vaccine is triggering that antibody response against platelet factor 4 is that the AstraZeneca vaccine has DNA in it. So that DNA in some people can get into the circulation and trigger these same complexes, he said. But that is just speculation and hasn't been shown to be the case yet. The other theory is that there may be some people predisposed to developing inflammation from the vaccine. That inflammation will lead to the production of cell-free DNA and then the formation of the immune complex that leads to clotting. What we know is the final complex is the same. That is, antibodies are being produced against platelet factor 4, and that complex is what activates platelets and other blood cells to form clots, Perdomo said. Other theories being investigated, they say. The European Medicines Agency stated that all possible options should be taken into consideration, such as possible quality defects or impurities in the vaccine batches or matter introduced during administering of the vaccine. Perdomo, is it Perdomo or Perdoma? They give different spellings. Said there are some differences between the heparin-induced and vaccine-induced clotting conditions, and age seems to be one of them. Usually, the older you are, the more susceptible you are to heparin-induced thrombocytopenia, Perdomo said. With the vaccine-induced syndrome, it appears people aged under 50 are more likely to be affected. In one cohort study of people who had this reaction after the vaccine, everyone affected except one person was under 50. Everyone else was age 49 and under. So in the case of the vaccine, it seems more likely younger people will have an overactive immune system. It's unusual because in all the other cases of this kind of thrombosis, it's the older population that's at higher risk. Now, there's some challenges here, my friend. Younger people are not at great risk for COVID, though they can spread it, and it's very bad for old people, hence the meme, you're killing grandma. I'll just put it this way. Talk to your doctor. All right. But I do want to point out something I find interesting. There was, I think, what was it like? 1 in a million is basically the amount of people who have gotten this blood clotting disorder. And as that one reporter pointed out, there is serious blood clotting for women on birth control. According to this stoptheclot.org website, they say, for the average woman taking birth control pills, the absolute risk of a blood clot is very small. Only 1 in 1,000 women per year who are taking birth control pills will develop such a clot. For a woman with thrombophilia or a history of thrombosis, however, the risk is significantly higher. The new patches, yada, yada. Okay, so we get it. I think it's interesting that we're shutting this vaccine down. I really do. I defer to the FDA and the CDC on this one. I know they're not perfect. I know they've gotten things wrong in some instances, but that's because we're not perfect people. We're all humans and pencils have erasers. So that's the best I can do. Now, I can also tell you this. Personally, I'm not running out the door to get the vaccine for a few reasons. For one, I'm younger. I'm not in the affected population, so I'm not stressed about it. I'm also not in a dense population center. I'm not stressed about it. And more importantly, I have food allergies. That's the number one issue for me. So I'm going to chill. And I guess things like this are good justification for why I'm chilling. I'm not going to be going out to these big cities. I'm not going to be in high density areas. And I'm not old, so I'm not super worried. But I do understand transmission is serious. COVID is, I think people need to understand that while we're seeing Texas and Florida do well, we're seeing some red and blue states that there doesn't seem to be a very strong correlation necessarily between lockdowns and infection rates. I think it's important to say that we did take mitigating factors to slow the spread of COVID. I do think it would have been substantially worse if we did nothing. I do think that many of our politicians did things poorly and are panicking, and some absolutely want power from this. However, I'm not a doctor. I don't know what we should or should do as a society. I have some opinions on the matter, but it is scary. I want everything to go back to normal. That could be wishful thinking. The vaccine was pushed out, and I'll tell you my thoughts on this, right? There was a period when the vaccine was being administered where, like when it came out a couple of months ago, where all of these stories popped up about these side effects, and it was coming from mainstream outlets. Meanwhile, you had these journalists calling people anti-vax for being scared about it. I'm like, okay, this is ridiculous. If CBS and CNN are going to be talking about these side effects, and you're going to get insulted for being scared about it, what are we doing? What are we doing? I wonder if some of this has to do with Trump succeeded where he wasn't supposed to. They don't want Trump to get credit for it. Joe Biden said, we're doing all this, and he didn't mention Donald Trump. Well, Donald Trump has issued a statement about this, 45th president making a bold statement. And the way Trump is framing it, it sounds like he thinks they're trying to take credit from him. He stated, the Biden administration did a terrible disservice to people throughout the world by allowing the FDA and CDC to call a pause in the use of the Johnson & Johnson vaccine. The results of this vaccine have been extraordinary, but now its reputation will be permanently challenged. The people who have already taken the vaccine will be up in arms. And perhaps All of this was done for politics, or perhaps it's the FDA for FDA's love for Pfizer. The FDA, especially with longtime bureaucrats within, has to be controlled. They should not be able to do such damage for possibly political reasons, or maybe because their friends at Pfizer have suggested it. They'll do things like this to make themselves look important. Remember, it was the FDA working with Pfizer who announced the vaccine approval 2 days after the 2020 presidential election. They didn't like me very much because I pushed them extremely hard. But if I didn't, you wouldn't have a vaccine for 3 to 5 years, or maybe not at all. It takes them years to act. Do your testing, clean up the record, and get the Johnson & Johnson vaccine back online quickly. The only way we defeat the China virus is with our great vaccines. Trump is certainly suggesting that they didn't want him to have credit for it. And there was this big story where they didn't. They said, we did this. And then, we didn't get any funding from Warp Speed. And it turned out they had a guaranteed contract. I think the vaccines are amazing. I think it's wonderful technology. I think vaccines have side effects. I think in this instance, it appears to be very, very rare. I think for the most part, there are a lot of people who don't realize the doctor prescribes you stuff all the time. You don't know what it is. So maybe do your research and think for yourself. But ultimately, I personally defer to my doctor. In this instance, I genuinely wonder if the media doesn't like the vaccine because it is a massive Trump victory. Fauci's been saying it doesn't matter if you get the vaccine, you got to wear a mask. And I'm like, you see, they're not interested. They're not fans of this. But look, I'm not big on conspiracies. I can just put it this way. The side effects are real. The CDC and the FDA are worried about them. So I defer to them. And ultimately, you should defer to your doctor for the 50 billionth time. We'll see how this plays out. I mean, I wish everyone the best. I wish everyone best health. Next segment's coming up at 4 p.m. over at youtube.com/Timcast. Thanks for hanging out, and I will see you all then.